How to respect yourself in front of toxic people. As Carl Jung once said, what you resist not only persists, but grows. And when it comes to toxic people, the greatest act of resistance is not fighting them. It's respecting yourself enough to rise above their chaos. In today's video, we'll explore powerful principles that help you protect your energy, stand firmly in your truth, and walk through life with dignity, even in the presence of negativity. As you listen, think about a moment when you lost a bit of yourself trying to please the wrong people. What lesson did it teach you? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because your experience might give strength to someone who needs it today. 1. Toxic people. Trigger your shadow, not your worth. Toxic people do not expose your worth. They awaken your unconscious wounds. The anger, shame, and defensiveness that rise in you during these encounters are not evidence that you are weak or broken, but signals from parts of you that were once hurt and never fully healed. What feels like an attack on your identity is often a collision with your shadow, the hidden emotional landscape shaped by past pain, rejection, and unmet needs. Their behavior may feel personal, but in truth, it is rarely about you. It is about what lives unresolved within them and what still echoes unresolved within you. Their cruelty is most often a projection of their own inner struggle. People who carry unhealed pain tend to offload it onto others because they lack the awareness or courage to face it within themselves. When someone belittles, manipulates, or disrespects you, they are often acting from fear, insecurity, or long-standing emotional wounds they have not dared to confront. What they accuse you of may reflect exactly what they cannot accept about themselves. Once you recognize this, you stop absorbing their words as truth and begin to see them as reflections of a broken inner world that has nothing to do with your real value. Your emotional reaction, however intense, is not proof of weakness. It is a message. When a toxic person triggers you deeply, it is because they have touched a familiar wound. Perhaps their tone mirrors a voice from your past that made you feel small, unworthy, or invisible. Perhaps their rejection stirs a long-standing fear of abandonment. Your body reacts before your mind can reason, revealing exactly where healing is still needed. This is how painful interactions become guides for spiritual awakening, showing you the hidden places inside that still seek compassion, safety, and self-validation. True self-respect does not come from trying to win against toxic people. It does not come from proving your worth, defending every accusation, or shrinking yourself to avoid conflict. It comes from the quiet realization that your value does not require permission from anyone who is emotionally blind. When you stop explaining yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you, you begin to reclaim your dignity. When you stop internalizing their chaos, you break the old loop of self-doubt that once controlled your reactions. As your spirituality deepens, your responses shift. You no longer meet toxicity with explosive emotion or silent self-betrayal. Instead, you learn to pause, to observe what is being stirred inside you, and to respond from awareness rather than instinct. You begin to notice when your impulse to please, defend, or withdraw is rooted not in the present moment, but in old emotional survival patterns. This awareness creates space between stimulus and response, and within that space, self-respect is born. Boundaries become acts of self-honor rather than emotional weapons. You learn that walking away is not weakness, silence is not defeat, and distance is sometimes the most loving choice you can make for your own nervous system. You realize that you do not need to convince a toxic person of your worth, because your worth was never in debate. It was only your belief in it that was once shaken. In this way, toxic people no longer dominate your sense of self. They become mirrors, unintended teachers who reveal where your shadow still lives and where your light is now strong enough to heal it. Through awareness, restraint, and inner grounding, you stop reacting from wounded identity and start living from conscious self-respect. Your worth becomes something you carry within you, untouched by projections and anchored in a deeper understanding of who you truly are. 2. Self-respect begins with non-reaction. Self-respect begins the moment you learn to pause instead of reacting. Because in that brief space of stillness, something powerful happens and you quietly take back control of yourself. When you do not react immediately, you are no longer being pulled by someone else's emotional hook. And real self-respect is revealed not through fighting back, but through choosing consciousness over impulse. Mastery is born in the invisible space between emotion and action, where you decide whether your energy will be ruled by instinct or guided by awareness. Toxic people thrive on reaction because reaction gives them power, attention, and influence over your inner state. They expect your anger, your defense, your emotional turbulence, because that is how they confirm their importance in your world. But when you remain calm, when you do not rush to explain, argue, or prove yourself, you quietly shut down the entire mechanism they rely on. This is not avoidance, and it is not weakness. It is emotional self-leadership. You are no longer handing over control of your nervous system to someone who thrives on disturbance. Through spirituality and spiritual development, you begin to understand that true power is not loud or forceful. It is steady, grounded, and unshaken. Silence becomes strength when it is chosen consciously, not out of fear. Stillness becomes authority when it is rooted in self-worth. Each time you choose non-reaction, you reinforce your inner boundaries without needing to announce them, and you teach your nervous system what safety inside yourself truly feels like. When you stop reacting automatically, you start responding deliberately, and this shift changes the entire way you move through the world. Your emotions no longer run you. You begin to guide them. This is not suppression. It is sovereignty. You are no longer denying your feelings, but you are no longer enslaved by them either. You observe them, regulate them, and decide consciously what deserves expression and what does not. Toxic people often become unsettled by this shift, not because you confronted them, but because you detached your emotional investment. They feel the loss of access before they understand it. You did not raise your voice, but you raised your frequency. You did not set loud boundaries, but you embodied them. This is one of the quiet miracles of spiritual development. You evolve internally, and the outer dynamics simply reorganize themselves around your new center of gravity. As you continue this practice, you begin to recognize how often you once gave your power away without realizing it. How many times you allowed someone else to decide your mood, your tone, your self-image, and even your peace. Through conscious non-reaction, you reclaim authorship over your inner world. You stop outsourcing your emotional climate to unstable environments, and instead, you cultivate stability from within. This inner stability slowly becomes unshakable certainty. You feel less need to defend yourself. You lose the urgency to explain. You no longer seek validation from people who arrive carrying chaos. Self-respect becomes less of a concept and more of a lived state. It settles into your posture, your voice, your breathing, and your decisions. You speak differently because you no longer need to convince. You walk differently because you no longer need to chase. Eventually, you realize that reacting was never strength. It was conditioning. Pausing, however, is discipline. Awareness is refinement. And calm is not passivity. It is precision. Toxic people cannot manipulate what they cannot emotionally disturb, and they cannot disturb what no longer reacts. This is where your real power lives, in the breath before the answer, in the silence before the impulse, in the stillness that replaces the old reflex to justify, argue, or collapse. Every time you choose that pause, protect your energy as part of your spirituality, and govern your reactions as part of your spiritual development, you are not losing power. You are steadily reclaiming it. Comment below. I choose calm and self-respect. If you are ready to stop reacting and start protecting your inner peace. 3. Separate your identity from their attacks. Their words only wound you when you begin to identify with them. And this is the quiet truth that changes everything when you are dealing with toxic people. You are not their criticism, not their anger, not their frustrated interpretation of who they think you are. The moment you detach your ego from their judgment, their attacks lose their power, because you stop feeding their words with your identity. Carl Jung taught that much of what people project onto others comes from their own unconscious wounds, fears, and unresolved shadows. And when you understand this, you stop taking their attacks personally. You start to see that what they say often reveals far more about their inner conflict than about your worth. As Jung's wisdom echoes through spiritual wisdom traditions, what truly harms you is not what is said, but what you believe about yourself in response to what is said. And the moment you refuse to merge your self-worth with their opinion, you remain whole even in the middle of their negativity. When you no longer identify with their words, something shifts inside you at a deep emotional and physical level. Your nervous system calms, your breath steadies, and your reactions soften, not because you become weak, but because you become anchored. You are no longer fighting for validation, and this inner stability is what truly unsettles toxic people, because they lose access to the emotional control they once had over you. Marcus Aurelius captured this truth when he said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." And this power comes alive the moment you realize that no one can define you without your consent. Respecting yourself in front of toxic people is not about arguing, defending, or proving anything. It is about standing quietly in the knowing of who you are and allowing their words to fall away without embedding themselves in your identity. The deeper your spiritual awakening becomes, the clearer you see that peace is not found in changing others, but in mastering your inner response to them. This is where Carl Jung and spiritual wisdom meet at their deepest point, because individuation, becoming your true self, requires that you pull your identity back from every label, insult, or projection that was never yours to carry. When you stop accepting emotional burdens that do not belong to you, you become emotionally untouchable, not because you feel nothing, but because you are no longer controlled by what comes from outside. You remain intact in your silence, steady in your presence, and grounded in your truth. The more you practice this inner separation, the more your self-respect grows naturally, and the less power toxic people have over your emotions, your choices, and your sense of self, because your identity is no longer built on their approval, their moods, or their judgments. 4. Do not mirror toxicity. Responding with the same energy as a toxic person may feel like strength in the moment, but in truth, it traps you in a shadow-to-shadow battle where no one truly wins. When you mirror their aggression, their manipulation, or their emotional chaos, you are no longer acting from clarity. You are reacting from the very darkness they live in. This is why refusing to mirror their behavior is not weakness at all, but a profound spiritual act of power. It is the moment you step out of unconscious reaction and into conscious self-direction. Calm, clarity, and dignity do more to dismantle toxicity than any argument ever could, because toxic dynamics only survive when both sides continue to feed the loop. When you choose calm instead of retaliation, something subtle but powerful happens. You disrupt the pattern the toxic person depends on. They expect emotional feedback, anger, defensiveness, fear, or desperation, because that is the fuel they use to control the situation. The moment you withhold that fuel, the fire begins to die on its own. Your calm becomes a silent boundary, a signal that you are no longer available for manipulation. In the language of Carl Jung, this is the moment you refuse to be possessed by the shadow. Instead of letting your unconscious wounds take over, you remain anchored in awareness. This is where spirituality stops being a concept and starts becoming a lived experience. And this is also where spiritual awakening quietly deepens, not through confrontation, but through self-mastery. Clarity follows naturally when you stop reacting emotionally. You begin to see the situation for what it truly is, not through the fog of anger or hurt, but through grounded perception. You recognize that toxic behavior is not about you. It is an expression of the other person's unresolved inner conflict. When you no longer personalize their actions, you no longer feel the urge to defend your worth through emotional battles. Instead, you protect your energy by staying clear. This clarity dissolves confusion, weakens manipulation, and restores your inner authority. You are no longer pulled into proving yourself. You simply stand in your truth, and that alone changes the entire dynamic. Dignity is the final piece that causes the toxic loop to collapse. Dignity means you do not lower yourself to meet someone in their chaos. It means you speak when necessary, remain silent when appropriate, and walk away when the situation demands it all without hatred, fear, or the need for revenge. Dignity is quiet, but it is unstoppable. When you maintain your dignity, you communicate something stronger than any insult or comeback ever could. You show that your self-respect is not negotiable. In that moment, the power dynamic shifts completely. The toxic person loses leverage because their greatest weapon, your emotional reaction, no longer works. In this way, refusing to mirror toxicity becomes an act of deep psychological and spiritual intelligence. You are no longer fighting the person in front of you. You are freeing the self within you. Each time you choose calm over chaos, clarity over confusion, and dignity over degradation, you are training your nervous system to recognize safety in self-control rather than in emotional survival. This is how true self-respect is built, not by winning arguments, but by refusing to participate in cycles that diminish your spirit. And this is the hidden power behind spiritual awakening. The realization that your peace is more valuable than your pride, that your awareness is stronger than their dysfunction, and that the greatest victory is not domination, but liberation. Don't forget to subscribe for more spiritual wisdom on protecting your energy, mastering self-respect, and rising above toxic behavior. 5. Boundaries are an act of self-love. Boundaries are an act of self-love. And when you stand in front of toxic people, this truth becomes a form of spiritual clarity, because setting boundaries is never a punishment. It is protecting your soul, preserving your wholeness, and reminding yourself that you do not need to explain, defend, or justify what keeps you emotionally safe. A boundary is simply a line that separates what nourishes your spirit from what drains it. And this is where spirituality and spiritual development become practical. Because real growth is not just about being kind. It is about being clear, firm, and rooted in self-respect. Toxic people thrive in environments where you over-explain, over-give, and silently tolerate disrespect. So when you begin to hold your ground, they may test you, not because you are wrong, but because your new strength threatens their old control. Yet true boundaries do not need aggression or anger. They need steadiness. They need the courage to say no without guilt, to step back without apology, and to protect your energy without fear of judgment. Every time you choose silence instead of reacting, space instead of arguing, or calm instead of chaos, you interrupt the cycle that toxic people rely on because they feed on confusion and emotional instability. Boundaries bring both of those to an end. At first, this shift feels uncomfortable, especially if you were raised to please others or avoid conflict. But discomfort is simply the growing pain of becoming whole. Your voice becomes firmer, your posture becomes stronger, your presence becomes sharper, even your silence gains weight. Toxic people sense this before they understand it, and that is why they resist. Not because you are doing something wrong, but because you are no longer someone they can manipulate. This is the moment Carl Jung's teachings reveal themselves in your daily life, because he believed that what you allow from others often reflects what you have yet to heal within yourself. So when you set a boundary, you are not just protecting your outer life, you are integrating your inner world, especially the shadow that once feared rejection, abandonment, and disapproval. The deeper your spiritual development grows, the more you realize that love without limits becomes self-betrayal, and limits without hatred become self-mastery. Boundaries teach you that forgiveness does not mean returning to harm. Kindness does not mean allowing disrespect. And peace does not require silence in the face of mistreatment. Some people will be upset with your boundaries, not because you are unkind, but because they were benefiting from your lack of them. That is why the journey feels lonely at times. But loneliness is often a sign that you are leaving the wrong places, not losing the right people. With each boundary you set, your nervous system relaxes, your clarity increases, and your emotional energy becomes protected rather than scattered. You stop asking, "What will they think of me?" and begin asking, "What do I think of myself when I allow this?" And that question becomes your compass for every relationship in your life. The message that remains is simple but transformative. Self-respect is not measured by how much you endure, but by how intentionally you choose. Your energy is sacred and deserves protection. Distance can be an act of love. Silence can be a form of strength. And every boundary you honor is a step toward healing, power, and authentic spiritual development. 6. Conscious silence is supreme strength. Conscious silence is not weakness. It is complete psychological control. Because the moment you no longer feel the need to defend yourself, explain your choices, or prove your worth, the toxic person instantly loses access to your energy. And this is where true self-respect quietly begins. Toxic people survive on reaction, on emotional chaos, on pulling others into endless conflict where they can dominate the narrative and drain your strength. But when you meet them with calm awareness instead of emotional resistance, you shut down the very system that feeds their behavior without ever raising your voice. In that silence, you are not shrinking. You are standing so firmly in your identity that their words can no longer reach your core. Carl Jung's spiritual wisdom teaches that what remains unconscious controls us, but what becomes conscious sets us free. And conscious silence is exactly that moment when you refuse to act from old wounds, old triggers, and unconscious reactivity. You are no longer trying to be understood by someone who benefits from misunderstanding you. And this is where your power quietly returns to you. Marcus Aurelius captured this truth when he said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." And that strength becomes visible the moment you stop explaining your boundaries to people who are committed to crossing them. You begin to understand that you do not owe emotional access to those who misuse your trust. And you do not owe clarity to those who distort everything you say. Silence at this level is not avoidance. It is mastery, because avoidance is still fear, while mastery is standing in complete inner control without needing to prove anything to anyone. Toxic people seek endless conversations, endless justifications, and endless emotional battles where you slowly give your authority away. But conscious silence sends a message stronger than any argument ever could. You no longer define my reactions, my mood, or my worth. Eleanor Roosevelt said, "No one can make you feel inferior without your consent." And that consent is most often given through reaction, not through words. When you remove your emotional response, you remove their leverage. Through the lens of Carl Jung and spiritual wisdom, this silence is where individuation begins to solidify. Because you stop performing for approval and start living from internal authority. You no longer speak from the wounded child seeking validation, but from the grounded adult who chooses peace over ego. When you reach this level of emotional sovereignty, toxic people begin to feel uncomfortable around you because they can no longer manipulate your nervous system, provoke your insecurities, or program your emotions. Your calm becomes a mirror that reflects their own instability back to them. And this is why silence unsettles those who thrive on chaos. Silence is not passive. It is deliberate restraint. It is choosing not to bleed your truth in rooms where it will only be used against you. And it is choosing not to argue with people who gain power from misunderstanding you. Your peace becomes more valuable than being right, and your energy becomes more sacred than being validated. As this practice deepens, your confidence no longer depends on being heard. Your identity no longer depends on being approved. And your worth no longer depends on being defended. You begin to move differently, speak less, observe more, and act with quiet authority rather than emotional urgency. Leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss powerful insights like this. If you're ready to practice conscious silence and reclaim your inner strength, type in the comments, "I choose calm over chaos." 7. Self-respect is built through small daily choices. Self-respect is never built in dramatic scenes or loud moments of victory. It grows quietly through the small, ordinary choices you make when no one is watching. Every time you pause instead of reacting, walk away instead of arguing, choose peace over validation, and protect your identity instead of your ego, you are strengthening the inner structure that holds your life together. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And this truth becomes clear when you face toxic people. They do not destroy you with one big event. They drain you through a series of temptations to react, to defend, to prove, to explain. Yet your power grows each time you resist the pull toward chaos. Pausing instead of reacting is one of the simplest yet most transformative acts of self-respect. Toxic people thrive on emotional explosions because your reaction gives them fuel, attention, and the illusion of control. When you pause, you reclaim your nervous system from their influence. You teach your body that you no longer dance to someone else's emotional rhythm. This pause becomes a doorway into deeper spirituality because silence allows you to see the truth beneath the surface. Not everything deserves your energy. Not everyone has earned a reaction. And not every situation requires you to abandon your inner peace. In that stillness, your spiritual awakening begins not with mystical visions, but with the simple realization that you can remain centered even when someone tries to pull you off balance. Walking away instead of arguing is not weakness, it is wisdom. Arguments with toxic people are never about finding clarity or solving problems. They are about creating confusion, shifting blame, or dragging you into emotional mud. When you walk away, you do not lose. You simply refuse to participate in a game designed to exhaust you. You choose dignity over chaos, and this act of leaving becomes a statement about who you are becoming. It shows that your time is valuable, your peace is sacred, and your emotional energy is not available for people who twist your words to feed their ego. Walking away strengthens your identity because it teaches you that self-respect is not proved through battle, but preserved through boundaries. Choosing peace over validation is another profound act of inner liberation. Toxic people often try to control you by keeping you desperate for their approval. They want you explaining yourself, defending your intentions, or proving your worth. But when you choose peace, you stop looking to broken people for confirmation of your value. You no longer seek reassurance from those who benefit from misunderstanding you. This is the moment you step into the spiritual maturity Carl Jung described, where your sense of self comes from within, not from unstable opinions. Peace becomes your compass, not validation. and you begin to move through life with a quiet strength that does not beg to be seen. Protecting your identity instead of your ego is where true transformation begins. Ego reacts. Identity remains rooted. Ego seeks to win. Identity seeks to stay aligned with truth. Ego wants to dominate. Identity wants to stay authentic. When toxic people try to provoke you, it is often your ego that wants to respond, defend, or retaliate. But your identity, your soul, your essence, understands that not every battle is meant to be fought. Choosing identity over ego is a spiritual discipline because it forces you to ask, who am I being right now? Instead of shrinking to match someone's dysfunction, you rise to match your own values. Through these daily, subtle choices, self-respect becomes a living practice. You change not by force, but by intention, not by fighting toxicity, but by refusing to let it shape your behavior. And as these choices accumulate, something irreversible happens inside you. Your boundaries become stronger, your reactions become calmer, and your presence becomes more grounded. What once triggered you no longer touches you. What once controlled you can no longer reach you. And this is the quiet, powerful sign of a true spiritual awakening when you finally realize that self-respect was never about controlling others, but about mastering yourself. If you find this content touching your heart, please consider becoming a member to receive more in-depth lessons and direct support from me. In the end, respecting yourself in front of toxic people is not about winning arguments or proving your worth. It's about knowing your value so deeply that no one can shake it. As Carl Jung reminds us, when you become conscious of who you truly are, you stop allowing others to define you or drain your energy. Choose boundaries over guilt, silence over chaos, and dignity over emotional battles. If this message resonated with you, please like the video, share it with someone who may need this reminder, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom for more deep insights into self-growth and inner strength. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss our upcoming videos. 8 signs you have the rarest psychological type on Earth. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Carl Jung. Today, we're diving into the rarest psychological type on Earth. The kind of mind that sees the world differently, not because it tries to, but because it's wired to. If you've ever felt out of place, deeply intuitive, or unusually perceptive, this video may reveal something powerful about who you really are. As you listen, try to reflect on your own experiences and ask yourself, which of these signs resonate with me most? Share your thoughts in the comments below so we can grow together as a community of self-aware, evolving souls. Welcome to Spiritual Wisdom, where every insight is an invitation to become more of who you were always meant to be. 1. Supernatural emotional depth. You do not simply feel emotions, you navigate them like vast oceans, each wave carrying layers of meaning that most people will never notice. And this is why your emotional depth often appears supernatural to those around you. What others call mood or sensitivity unfolds within you as a full psychological symphony, where every subtle shift in energy becomes a message your inner world knows how to translate. You sense unspoken intentions, hidden emotional tones, and the quiet truths buried beneath someone's carefully crafted words. Not because you are unstable, but because you are exquisitely tuned into the deeper layers of human experience. Carl Jung, called this profound inner sensitivity the doorway to the objective psyche, the realm where emotions are not just personal reactions, but windows into universal patterns of truth. Your feelings do not simply pass through you. They speak to you, guide you, and sometimes warn you, which is why you often notice emotional changes or energetic discomfort long before anyone else realizes something is wrong. This depth can make you appear intense or mysterious, but in reality, it is emotional sophistication, your ability to perceive meaning beyond the surface. And yet, this rare sensitivity often pulls you naturally towards spirituality because you have always sensed that life moves through invisible layers, that every emotion has a spiritual echo, and that every connection carries energetic information beneath the physical interaction. As you grow, this sensitivity begins shaping your spiritual awakening, helping you recognize that inner guidance is not imagination, but intuition sharpened through emotional intelligence. You have known for a long time that what you feel is real, even when the world encourages you to numb it or doubt it. Your emotional depth becomes a compass, pointing you toward alignment, truth, and integrity, and pulling you away from environments, people, and energies that are out of resonance. This is why your presence often feels comforting yet powerful. People feel seen by you in a way they cannot explain because you perceive the soul behind the behavior, the intention beneath the action, the wound beneath the words. But your depth has also shaped your story. You may have been told you were too sensitive, too emotional, or overthinking, when in truth, you were simply processing the world at a greater vibrational frequency than those around you. You learned early that others do not feel with the same intensity, and you may have dimmed your own emotional truth to make them comfortable. Yet, as Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And who you truly are is someone whose emotional complexity is not a flaw, but an extraordinary gift, an inner instrument tuned to the frequencies most people never hear. When you honor this depth, instead of suppressing it, your emotions refine into wisdom. Your intuition strengthens, your self-awareness sharpens, and the world within you becomes a powerful source of clarity, perception, and spiritual strength. This is the silent brilliance behind your emotional depth. It is not chaos, but intelligence, not weakness, but refined perception, not instability, but an innate connection to truth, one that continues guiding you deeper into your spirituality and your ongoing spiritual awakening. Comment below. I honor my emotional depth if you recognize this rare sensitivity within yourself and are ready to embrace the unique gift Carl Jung spoke about. 2. Sacred curiosity and radical questioning. You naturally live in a state of sacred curiosity and radical questioning, always drawn to the deeper meaning beneath life, systems, and relationships, never satisfied with surface-level explanations or blind conformity. While others may accept what is handed to them without resistance, you feel an inner pull to ask why, to look behind appearances, and to sense what is hidden beneath words and behaviors. This is not rebellion for the sake of rebellion. It is the mark of a rare mind, one that Carl Jung described through the transcendent function, the ability to hold paradox, to live between opposites, and to perceive truths that most people instinctively avoid because they feel uncomfortable or destabilizing. You are wired to seek meaning, not comfort. This is why you cannot fully surrender to shallow norms or rigid belief systems that lack authenticity. Your inner world refuses to settle for borrowed conclusions, emotional shortcuts, or inherited ideas that do not resonate with truth. Even when society encourages you to stay quiet, stay small, or accept what is convenient, something within you continues to whisper that there is more to life than what is visible. This inner tension between what is seen and what is felt is where both your spirituality and spiritual development quietly evolve. Because your questions are not destructive, they are awakening. They pull you inward and upward at the same time, guiding you to examine not only the world, but also your fears, your patterns, your attachments, and your unconscious motives. Because of this, you often move through life with heightened awareness. You notice emotional undercurrents in conversations, unspoken tensions in systems, and hidden motives in relationships. Not because you are suspicious, but because your perception naturally extends beyond the surface. You feel things before they are said, sense shifts before they become visible, and recognize misalignment even when everything appears fine on the outside. This depth also shapes the way you bond with others. You seek meaning over convenience, truth over performance, and authenticity over approval. Shallow connections drain you, while deep, soulful exchanges nourish you, because your inner world is designed for depth, not pretense. This same sacred curiosity that sharpens your awareness also turns inward, making you capable of profound self-reflection, emotional honesty, and inner growth. You question why you feel what you feel, why you repeat certain cycles, and what unresolved parts of you are asking to be seen. This is where real transformation begins. Because you do not escape discomfort, you study it. Jung's work lives through this process as you learn to hold both light and shadow, confidence and doubt, strength and vulnerability at once without collapsing into extremes. This capacity to exist between opposites is what allows you to evolve rather than remain fixed in fear or illusion. Yet this depth does not come without weight. At times, your mind feels heavy from constant reflection. Your heart grows tired from emotional intensity, and loneliness can arise when few people seem to speak your inner language. When insight is not balanced with grounding, you may drift into overthinking, emotional fatigue, or spiritual isolation. Still, this question is not your weakness. It is your compass. It is the quiet force that keeps you aligned with growth, even when you feel lost. It explains why you are drawn to psychology, symbolism, mysticism, healing, and the unseen forces shaping human behavior. Often without knowing exactly why, only that something ancient within you is being activated. The rare truth is that minds like yours are not meant to repeat what has already been thought, but to refine it through lived awareness. You are here to challenge unconscious patterns, to embody insight, and to transform confusion into clarity through lived experience. The deeper you honor this nature, the more your life shifts from searching to recognizing, from resisting to understanding, from surviving to consciously evolving. The true value you are meant to carry forward is simple yet powerful. Trust your questions instead of silencing them. Seek truth without needing permission. Allow growth without guilt. Balance reflection with rest. And recognize that your sacred curiosity is not a burden. It is the engine of your spiritual development and the doorway through which your spirituality becomes real, embodied, and transformative. 3. Conscious independence and self-built identity. You developed your psychological independence early in life, not because the path was gentle, but because adversity required you to rely on your own inner strength long before you could safely rely on anyone else. Instead of seeking constant validation from the outside world, you learned to build your identity from within, layer by layer, through self-reflection, endurance, and quiet self-trust. This inner construction of the self is what Carl Jung called individuation, the lifelong journey toward becoming whole, a process most people unconsciously avoid because it demands responsibility, honesty, and the courage to face both light and shadow. When others were learning how to belong by fitting in, you were learning how to survive by standing alone. Over time, that separation did not harden you, it refined you. What began as emotional necessity slowly transformed into inner clarity, and what once felt like isolation evolved into awareness. You no longer shape yourself to match expectations because your sense of self was forged through lived experience rather than borrowed through social roles. This is one of the clearest signs of a rare psychological type. Your identity is not assembled from approval, trends, or emotional dependence, but built through conscious choice and inner inquiry. This kind of independence carries a quiet power. You may speak softly, yet your presence feels grounded. You may choose solitude at times, yet your energy still feels steady in a crowded room. You do not cling to others to feel complete, because you learned early that wholeness must be cultivated from the inside. While many are still searching for themselves in labels, relationships, or social mirrors, you are already walking the inward path, guided by an inner compass shaped through struggle and reflection. This path is not loud, but it is deeply rooted in spiritual wisdom. As Carl Jung once said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, yet very few willingly endure the discomfort required to reach that truth. You did not wait for permission to begin that work. Life placed you on that path early, and through it, you developed discernment instead of dependency, depth instead of imitation, and self-authority instead of emotional borrowing. This does not make you cold or distant. It makes you internally anchored. Your independence is not a rejection of connection, but a mature form of it. You do not seek others to complete you, but to share with you. And this is precisely why people may feel both drawn to you and unsettled by you. At the same time, your self-built identity quietly reflects what many have not yet faced within themselves. Your inner stability exposes the fragility of unconscious living without ever needing to say a word. The deeper you move along this inward journey of individuation, the more you realize that your independence is not merely psychological, but spiritual as well. You no longer look to the world to define you. You listen inward to your conscience, your intuition, and a truth that cannot be seen but can be felt. This is where spiritual awakening quietly begins, not with spectacle, but with the steady courage to stand in your truth, even when no one else understands it. And in that silent strength, your life becomes a living expression of the union between Carl Jung's psychology and timeless spiritual wisdom. Affirm your inner strength by commenting below, "I am sovereign in my identity." Let this be your reminder that your independence and self-built identity are guiding you toward your highest truth. 4. Hyperperceptive intuition. Your hyperperceptive intuition gives you an ability that most people will never fully understand. because you do not simply observe the world, you feel it. You sense the subtle shifts in tone, the tightening of someone's jaw, the hesitation behind a forced smile, and the unspoken truth hiding beneath polished words. This is not overthinking. It is what Carl Jung described as perception via the unconscious, a natural and immediate recognition of patterns that others step over blindly. You pick up emotional undercurrents in silence, detect mismatched energy before conflict appears, and notice the tiniest fractures in someone's behavior long before they become visible to the rest of the world. And while people may misunderstand this depth as suspicion or sensitivity, you intuitively know it is far more precise than that, because your mind works in layers. What others hear as conversation, you experience as information woven with nuance, tension, and meaning that lives between the lines. Yet this level of awareness, when left unprotected, can slowly drain you from the inside out, because feeling so much requires boundaries that most people with your rare psychological type never learned to set early in life, especially when they were conditioned to be the healer, the listener, the emotional anchor for everyone else. This intuitive gift becomes heavy not because it is wrong, but because it is constant. You absorb the unresolved grief of a friend when they step into the room. You sense the disappointment someone carries, even when they say they are fine. You feel the shift in someone's energy the moment they lose trust, and you detect misalignment in relationships long before the breakup arrives. And while all of this gives you profound psychological insight, it also becomes a silent burden, because your nervous system is processing information that others are not aware they are even expressing. This is why emotional burnout appears in your life, not as sudden collapse, but as slow erosion. Too much empathy, too many unspoken responsibilities, too much merging with people who never realized how deeply you felt them. Jung warned that without conscious boundaries, the unconscious becomes a force that overwhelms rather than guides. And this is precisely the tension you live through. Sensing everything, yet not always knowing how to filter what isn't yours. Here is where spirituality becomes essential, not as belief, but as a practice of self-preservation. Because your spiritual awakening begins the moment you realize that your intuition is not meant to carry people, but to clarify your own path. As you grow into this awareness, you start recognizing that your intuition is not random. It is a compass. It tells you when a room is unsafe before your logic catches up. It warns you when someone's words do not match their energy. It guides you toward people whose presence feels like alignment, and distances you from those whose presence feels like heaviness. With time, you learn that not every emotional signal requires intervention. Not every tension requires healing, and not every sorrow you sense belongs in your hands. You begin to separate empathy from responsibility, compassion from self-abandonment, and awareness from absorption. And once you understand that your sensitivity is not weakness, but refined perception, you stop apologizing for noticing what others overlook. You stop shrinking yourself to make people comfortable. You stop explaining how you know things you shouldn't know. Instead, you trust the quiet truth rising inside you, the same truth that Jung spent his life studying. When the unconscious speaks, the wise learn to listen. And in honoring this rare gift with stronger boundaries, clearer intuition, and deeper self-respect, you transform your hyper-perceptive nature from emotional exhaustion into spiritual clarity, allowing your inner world to become not a sponge for others, but a sanctuary for yourself. 5. Intense craving for meaning and authenticity. You carry an intense craving for meaning and authenticity that quietly governs the way you think, feel, and move through the world. And this is why you cannot tolerate inauthenticity in any form. Shallow goals feel empty to you. Surface-level conversations feel exhausting, and unaligned paths feel almost painful to follow because your inner world demands truth, coherence, and depth. You are not satisfied with appearances or borrowed identities. You want what is real beneath the surface. This inner demand is not something you learned. It is built into your psychological structure, and it constantly pulls you toward alignment between who you are inside and how you live on the outside. Because you live with this level of inner integrity, you naturally reject what is false without needing to argue or attack it. You may simply lose interest, withdraw your energy, or quietly choose a different path. Yet even in your silence, your presence has an effect. Without intending to, you challenge others to confront their own masks, because your refusal to participate in illusion highlights where others are still pretending. In this way, you function as what can only be described as an evolutionary catalyst. Change is stirred in your presence, not because you demand it, but because your way of being exposes what is misaligned. As Carl Jung expressed so powerfully, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And this truth is not just an idea for you. It is a lived experience that shapes your daily choices. Your devotion to truth often places you on a different rhythm from the world around you. You may feel out of place in environments that reward performance over substance or status over sincerity. What excites others may leave you cold, while what truly moves you is meaning, purpose, and inner coherence. This is where your path of spirituality and spiritual development deepens, not through rituals alone, but through the constant inner refinement of values, motives, and identity. You are not driven to accumulate more masks. You are driven to remove them. Over time, your standards in relationships, work, and even self-expression become more precise, not because you are becoming rigid, but because your clarity is sharpening. This clarity, however, can be misunderstood. Some may see your intensity as judgment, your distance as coldness, or your silence as superiority. In truth, your intensity is simply devotion. Your distance is discernment, and your silence is often self-protection. You are not rejecting people. You are rejecting falseness. And this rejection is not destructive. It is surgical. It removes what does not belong so that what is true can finally breathe. Each time you choose alignment over comfort or truth over approval, something old dissolves and something more essential begins to take shape. Your life, therefore, becomes less about fitting into the world as it is, and more about embodying the deeper potential of who you are becoming. Growth for you does not feel like climbing higher. It feels like going deeper. It feels like shedding, refining, and remembering. You begin to realize that your sensitivity to falseness is not a weakness to be corrected, but a gift to be mastered. It protects you from wasting years on what does not matter. It guides you toward relationships built on truth rather than performance. It anchors you in a form of spirituality that is lived through integrity, not merely spoken through beliefs. And through this discipline of inner honesty, you quietly encourage others to begin their own transformation simply by standing in what is real. Don't forget to subscribe for more wisdom on transforming your search for meaning into true inner fulfillment. 6. Continuous evolution and outgrowing the familiar. You repeatedly outgrow people, places, and even the versions of yourself you once believed would last forever. And this constant shedding is not instability. It is the natural rhythm of transformation that Carl Jung described as psychological death and rebirth. Each time you evolve, something within you must quietly end so something deeper can begin. And that process is rarely comfortable. You begin to feel that you can no longer return to spaces that once felt familiar because they now require you to dim your truth, soften your awareness, or pretend to be smaller than you have become. What once felt like home now feels restrictive. And this inner conflict is one of the clearest signatures of a rare psychological type. As your awareness expands, your tolerance for what is false, stagnant, or misaligned disappears. And this is where many relationships, environments, and even identities begin to fall away. People who once understood you may no longer recognize you, not because you are lost, but because you have changed at a level they cannot yet follow. Jung once said, "What looks like a breakdown is often a breakthrough." And this truth becomes visible in your life as cycles of ending and renewal that shape your character again and again. Every time you rise into a new level of clarity, you lose access to the world you came from. And that loss can feel painful, confusing, and deeply lonely. Yet this loneliness is not emptiness. It is the space where your new self is being formed. You are no longer able to bend your values just to preserve connection, and you no longer have the ability to ignore what your soul now sees. Your growth becomes irreversible. Once a truth is seen, it cannot be unseen. Once your inner world shifts, your outer world must eventually follow. This is why others may resist your change, judge it, or misunderstand it. Your evolution reflects what they may still be avoiding within themselves, and not everyone is ready to face that reflection. This is where spiritual wisdom quietly weaves into psychological transformation. You are not simply changing for ambition, success, or appearance. You are changing because something inside you demands alignment between who you are becoming and how you are living. You would rather experience discomfort than live in contradiction. You would rather walk alone than walk falsely. This is the cost of deep awareness and the quiet mark of a rare inner structure. As Carl Jung warned, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And that privilege often arrives wrapped in the pain of outgrowing what once felt safe. Each time you move forward, you leave behind not only people and places, but entire identities, old fears, old beliefs, old self-definitions that no longer hold your truth. Your life begins to feel less like a straight road and more like a series of initiations. Endings arrive without asking permission. New beginnings rise before you feel ready. Yet with every cycle, your inner authority strengthens, your clarity deepens, and your attachment to illusion weakens. You slowly stop fearing loss because you finally understand that every loss has been shaping your ability to live authentically. At a certain point, you no longer ask why doors keep closing behind you. You understand that they close because you no longer belong in the rooms they lead to. This awareness is not only psychological, it is spiritual. True spiritual wisdom is not about staying the same while speaking higher truths. It is about allowing your entire being to transform in alignment with what you now see as real. And the more you honor this inner evolution, the more you realize that your constant change is not chaos. It is the quiet proof of an awakened inner compass, guided not by comfort, but by truth. As Carl Jung revealed through the depths of the human psyche. 7. Transformational presence. Your presence carries a quiet gravity that few can name but many can feel. A gentle yet undeniable pull that makes people open up, soften, and unravel truths they have kept buried for years. Because something about the way you listen without judgment, without rushing, without needing to prove anything, creates an atmosphere where the soul finally exhales. Carl Jung called this the helper syndrome, a rare psychological pattern found in those whose empathy is so deep and whose spirituality is so instinctive that transformation happens around them almost effortlessly. You don't force change. You don't preach change. You simply embody a stillness that invites others to find themselves again, as if your energy quietly tells them, it's safe now. You can come home to yourself. And yet, this powerful gift often begins as a subtle pattern you don't even notice at first. Strangers confide in you within minutes. Friends tell you their darkest truths with trembling voices. And people who usually hide behind emotional armor suddenly break open in your presence. They might say, I don't know why I'm telling you this. And the truth is, they don't, but their subconscious does. Your presence feels like a sanctuary, a warm room in the middle of a storm, a soft ground where their defenses melt and their real selves step forward. This is the mark of someone deep in the process of spiritual awakening. Someone whose inner clarity and emotional intelligence naturally extend into the outer world. People feel lighter after talking to you, not because you solved their problems, but because your calmness reorganizes their chaos. Like two chemical substances meeting, as Jung famously said, if there is any reaction, both are transformed. And with you, there is always a reaction gentle, healing, and often life-changing. But with this gift comes a quiet burden, one that grows heavier if you don't learn the spiritual wisdom hidden underneath. When you hold space so deeply for others, you risk becoming their emotional anchor, the person they lean on for stability, clarity, and meaning. And while your empathy is expansive, it is not infinite. Over time, you may notice your energy fading after long conversations, your thoughts sinking under the emotional weight you've absorbed, your spirit becoming quieter, not in peace, but in exhaustion. This is where discernment becomes essential. You are here to guide, not to carry, to reflect, not to absorb, to support, not to lose yourself inside someone else's inner storm. Without boundaries, the helper becomes the one who needs help, not because they are weak, but because they gave too much without realizing their own needs. As your spirituality deepens, you learn to distinguish between being present and being consumed. You begin to understand that true service does not wound the servant, and real compassion does not require self-sacrifice. You start recognizing the moments when someone seeks your presence not to heal, but to escape their own responsibility. The moments when silence is wiser than advice. The moments when walking away is more loving than staying. And with this awareness, your transformational presence evolves into something even stronger, an energy that heals without draining, that guides without rescuing, that empowers without absorbing the other person's shadows. Your role changes from emotional sponge to conscious mirror, from quiet caretaker to awakened soul who knows how to hold space without losing yourself inside it. And in that shift, you discover the rarest truth of all. Your presence transforms others most powerfully when you are also fully present for yourself. To honor your transformational presence, declare it with confidence. Comment below. I rise and transform, to affirm your growth and inspire others to awaken their power too. 8. Deep inner sense of purpose. Even if undefined, you feel a quiet but persistent pull towards something meaningful that you cannot yet fully explain. And this feeling is neither random nor driven by ego, but rises from a deeper place within you. Carl Jung described this mysterious force as potential seeking expression, a truth that lives in your soul long before your mind can give it a name. When you ignore this inner calling, life may begin to feel strangely empty, heavy with anxiety, or lacking direction, even when everything on the surface appears successful. Yet when you begin to live in harmony with it, a subtle but powerful sense of peace and fulfillment starts to grow. Not because all your questions are answered, but because your inner and outer worlds begin moving in the same direction through spirituality and spiritual development. This inner purpose often reveals itself through restlessness, deep sensitivity to meaning, and an unshakable sense that you were meant for more than survival, routines, or shallow ambition. You may feel different from others, not because you are better, but because you are wired to search beneath the surface of life. The discomfort you experience when living out of alignment is not a weakness. It is a signal from your psyche that something essential is being ignored. Jung believed that when this inner voice is suppressed, the soul suffers, and that suffering often shows up as emotional fatigue, dissatisfaction without a clear cause, or the haunting feeling that your true life has not yet fully begun. As you begin to listen inwardly, even in small ways, you may notice gentle shifts unfolding. Your priorities start to change, your relationships transform, and your choices become guided more by inner truth than by external validation. What once felt like confusion begins to reveal itself as preparation. What once felt like weakness becomes a pathway to depth, and what once felt like loneliness becomes space for authenticity. You are no longer driven by the need to impress, but by the desire to become real. Peace does not come from certainty, but from sincerity. It does not come from control, but from trust. It does not come from perfection, but from honest participation in your own becoming. Your purpose does not arrive as a loud revelation or a single dramatic moment. More often, it appears as a direction rather than a destination, a way of being rather than a status or title. It guides you through intuition, moments of discomfort, unexpected synchronicities, and quiet inner resonance. As you follow these signals, your outer world slowly reshapes itself to mirror the truth you are discovering within. You may not immediately gain clarity about where the path will lead, but you gain something far more powerful, a sense of coherence, a feeling that your thoughts, values, and actions are finally aligned. The deeper message is clear. Your inner calling is real, even when it feels undefined. And ignoring it breeds anxiety, while honoring it cultivates peace. Discomfort often acts as a compass rather than a flaw. And true fulfillment grows from alignment rather than achievement. Your spiritual development unfolds not through force, pressure, or comparison, but through quiet awareness, courage, and steady attention to what your soul has been trying to express all along. In the end, discovering that you may carry one of the rarest psychological types on earth is not about feeling superior. It is about understanding your depth, your sensitivity, and your unique responsibility to the world, as Carl Jung so beautifully revealed through his wisdom. If these 8 signs resonate with your inner life, it may be a reminder that your way of seeing, feeling, and thinking is not meant to be hidden, but honored and refined through self-awareness and conscious growth. If you found value in this message, please like the video, share it with someone who needs this insight, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom for more deep psychological and spiritual teachings. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss our upcoming videos on Carl Jung, self-discovery, and inner awakening.